Fashion, an industry that tends to reflect the changing socioeconomic dynamics of the consumer, has moved away from delicate fibers and waist-defining silhouettes and is instead embracing a more practical approach to clothing, one that prioritizes durable fabrics, structured seam lines, and utilitarian design. My name is Elizabeth Grace Coyne, a writer, editor, and journalist reporting on the intersection of fashion, culture, technology, sustainability, and business. And in today's video, I'll be discussing how the recent popularization of the aptly named Fisherman core aesthetic, characterized by ornately knit sweaters in earthy tones of cream, beige, and green, knee-length boots crafted from water-resistant materials, and oversized vests constructed with pockets, zippers, and layers of mesh, has inspired a more in-depth analysis on the origin of the trend, especially as it relates to the slower-growing rise in a workwear-inspired wardrobe full of utilitarian-style fashions. This subtle shift in aesthetics seemed to appear first and most prominently post-pandemic, with the well-documented labor movement acting as a catalyst for a changing style landscape by inspiring workers to demand better conditions and consumers to rethink their favorite wardrobe staples. The movement, which consisted of union protests that called for the reform of harsh working conditions, discrepancies in pay, and the lack of job security, can also be linked to the hyperfixation on essential workers during the pandemic, increasing the visibility of blue-collar jobs and the workers' sensible, functional, and practical way of dressing. The intense news coverage of these events, paired with the rise of social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram, influencing the ways fashion trends were shared on a much larger scale than previous to the turn of the decade, inspired consumers to approach fashion from a utilitarian point of view. The popularized pieces young consumers began to style not only took reference, but were directly purchased from iconic workwear brands like Carhartt, Dickies, Wrangler, and Patagonia, all retailers that specialize in clothing meant to protect the wearer from outside elements. Specifically, Carhartt, an American workwear brand founded in 1889, is known for its selection of heavy-duty items such as jackets, coats, overalls, coveralls, vests, shirts, jeans, dungarees, fire-resistant clothing, and hunting apparel. According to the brand, Carhartt created uniforms for the U.S. military during World War I, as well as coveralls for soldiers and support personnel, jungle suits for Marines in the Pacific, and workwear for women entering the factories at home during World War II. In stark contrast, the brand is currently most commonly seen on the backs of famous musical artists, embroidered on the hats of trendy 20-somethings, and written on the sleeves of downtown skaters, all who have little to no experience working in industries that require Carhartt or Carhartt-adjacent clothing as a uniform. Following the steady growth trajectory propelling the trend into the mainstream, brands began to intentionally develop product lines and market-like items towards a now enticed consumer demographic. One example of this was with Ford, the American automobile manufacturer who partnered with apparel brand Dickies, as well as Sydney Sweeney, an actress best known for her role in the hit HBO show Euphoria, to create a capsule collection that reimagined traditional workwear pieces. The line was inspired by Sweeney's popular TikTok account Sid's Garage, where viewers could watch the actress remodel her vintage cherry red Ford Bronco. The videos posted post-Dickies collaboration followed Sweeney, dressed head to toe in pieces from the collection, as she demonstrated basic mechanical skills like checking one's tire pressure or jump-starting one's car, a feminist touch to an already marketable social media campaign. An unintentional but notable result of this growing fashion phenomenon and the slight shift in direct-to-consumer marketing techniques was the influence of sustainability. Although many brands focused on creating new collections inspired by the rise in the aesthetic's popularity, this trend inspired the consumer to participate, knowingly or not, in sustainable practices. Not only were consumers turning to thrift stores to find vintage clothing from their favorite workwear brands, but they were also more likely to mend damaged items because of their then worn-looking aesthetic appeal, rather than replace old pieces with new ones. This newfound appreciation for older and more lived-in garments worked to transition consumers into the participation of even more sustainable buying habits as they continued to build their workwear-inspired wardrobe. Circling back to the current Fisherman core aesthetic and the workwear influence on modern clothing staples, one can argue this growing trend carries with it certain ethical implications that could diminish the severity of, and in turn romanticize, blue-collar jobs and the lifestyle of those who work them. Is it daft and elitist to imply that the practical garments worn by those who perform daily physical labor at the cost of low pay and poor working conditions are stylish? Personally, I believe that while clothing and aesthetics are closely linked to the subgroups that popularize them through repeated wear, no clothing is technically off limits and should be accessible to anyone who wants to partake in a new silhouette, color story, or mix of textiles. However, I know my opinion is slightly tainted by my age, gender, and interest in the subject matter, amongst other factors, so I'm curious to hear what others have to say regarding the aesthetic's newfound popularity. Evident in the transformation of workwear marketplaces, brands have shifted from creating utilitarian clothing solely for the protection of the wearer using the most durable materials, and are now additionally producing for young consumers eager to adhere to the popular aesthetic, showcasing classic fits, neutral colors, and natural textures as part of their everyday wardrobe. The rise of mainstream workwear has changed the way fashion is socially defined, putting a greater emphasis on the consumer's emotional relationship with clothing than their physical or practical needs. And I wouldn't be surprised if this shift in garment development continues, with the production of fashions that are purely aesthetic, despite their more functional origins. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Elizabeth Grace Coyne, and I hope you enjoyed this video.